Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 15th of May, 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. We're delighted to be joined by David Scott, bringing us Northern Exposure from north of the border, and Mark Anderson reporting from the United States.
Okay, well, we've got some really good news, Brian, because Vladimir Zelensky, is in the UK. Meeting Rishi Sunak. This is the image that Rishi pushed out this morning. We didn't show any of the more explicit images because some of the mainstream press have been showing the hugging and the kissing and tongues down the throats, this kind of thing. But this is what Zelensky tweeted out this morning. Today, London, the UK is a leader when it comes to expanding our capabilities on the ground and in the air. This cooperation will continue today. I will meet my friend Rishi. We will conduct substantive negotiations face-to-face and in delegations. So according to number 10 anyway, this is the first what they call world leader that Rishi Sunak has hosted at Chequers. Zelensky will update Rishi Sunak on his meetings with European leaders over the weekend, which we'll talk about in a second. They're going to talk about how we're going to continue to support Ukraine's needs and how that's going to be expanded to the international community, both in terms of immediate military equipment and long-term defences. And then the number 10 press release also said that last week the UK confirmed that we've provided Storm Shadow precision missiles to Ukraine. And today, Rishi Sunak will confirm the further UK provision of hundreds of air defence missiles and further unmanned aerial systems, including hundreds of new long-range attack drones with a range of over 200 kilometres. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
It is going to make a difference, Mike. It's going to prolong the conflict and it's going to result in the deaths of tens of thousands more Ukrainians. It will also kill Russians, but it takes us closer to World War III. I find this whole business obscene. If the British government wants to get into Ukraine and fight, then we should get the troops in and they should fight on the ground. We should get Ben Wallace in. We should get Rishi Sunak and all the rest of the politicians and their sons and daughters, and they should fight. But what is so obscene is this is a war by UK, NATO against Russia, but using Ukrainians essentially. I'm running out of words to describe it. It is obscene.
Zelensky in the UK today, but he has been on a whistle-stop tour of Europe, as we just mentioned. So here he is in Italy, where he met Pope Francis. He met the Italian Prime Minister and the Italian President. He said, I'm meeting with the President of Italy, Sergio Mattarella, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, and the Pope, an important visit for approaching victory of Ukraine. So that was him meeting the Italians. And in a second, we'll see him meeting the Germans, because as soon as he finished with Italy, he headed off to Germany, where he met Schultz. There they are shaking hands and so on. Very similar kind of thing. Shake hands with the leader, have a quick inspection tour, and then have a press conference. This was the kind of format of it. But of course, it didn't end there because, the Ukraine was awarded the Karls Prize for 2023. I don't know what we think about that. This is the Charlemagne Prize. David, have you got any?
It's political Eurovision.
It is political Eurovision. Just before I ask comment from David here, just make the point that if you look at this image, just the very bottom left-hand corner there, you'll see the medal itself in its box on a stand. Unfortunately, it fell off the stand just apparently spontaneously during his speech, and he had to stop his speech and go and pick it up off the floor. So I'm not sure who kicked it over. But anyway, David, what are your thoughts on the Charlemagne Prize going to Ukraine?
Well, it's all going towards that great example of a united Europe, a united, militarily strong, continentally dominant Europe that Charlemagne represents. So, there is a logic to it. It's a bit grim, though.
Indeed. So coming back to the UK, then, this is what Rishi had to say this morning. This is a crucial moment in Ukraine's resistance to a terrible war of aggression they did not choose or provoke. And well, did they or did they not? Did the UK, or how much involvement did the UK have in any provocation of Russia? I just want to remind everybody, because at the end of the press release that Number 10 issued today, they said that since the outbreak of full-scale war, the UK has also trained 15,000 Ukrainian troops in the UK on top of 22,000 troops trained in Ukraine between 2014 and 2022 under Operation Orbital. Now, many people won't be aware of Operation Orbital, but this is the badge that the participants all wear. And you can see the UK flag above. And so, well, the press release said 2014. In fact, Operation Orbital, this is the UK's training mission to Ukraine. It was established, according to the UK, following the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia. That's the UK's words. It was established in 2015. So the UK government adopted a decision to establish a training group of British instructors called Operation Orbital, and to deploy British military personnel to Ukraine to provide guidance and training to the Ukrainian armed forces. It's almost as if they had figured already by that point that some kind of conflict with Russia was inevitable, and maybe they were doing a little bit to provoke that themselves. But anyway, here we move on to 2018. And Orbital, which had up to that point just been about land forces, was extended to the maritime domain. So this brought in instructor teams from the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, to train the Ukrainian Navy following threats to the Azov Sea, or in the Azov Sea. And then in 2019, the UK government decided to extend Operation Orbital until 2023. We'll see whether it gets any further extension in Ukraine itself, but obviously the new way is for the Ukrainians to come to the UK for training instead.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch the second figure there, but I think you were talking about a batch of 17,000 troops and a batch of 22,000.
15,000 that they've trained in the UK in the last year, and 22,000 that they've trained in Ukraine.
15 and 22 in theatre, so 37,000 troops. And the key question for the UK government is how many of those men are still alive? And if they went to the front, the answer is very few of them.
Yes. In the meantime, then, Rishi Sunak, after today's meeting with Zelensky, is himself going to fly off to the Council of Europe Summit in Reykjavik. That's taking place tomorrow and Wednesday. Zelensky is going to join that meeting virtually, apparently. But Rishi is supposedly going there to try to raise weapons, we should say, for Ukraine. This is all about getting support for Ukraine, but also he's apparently going to be speaking to people at the Council of Europe about the migration problem in the UK. Okay, but mainly it's about weapons for Ukraine. And then he's off to the G7 in Japan, where he is again attempting to raise weapons, or raise money for weapons and supplies and so on. So he's going to drive, he says, new investment into the UK from Japan, but it's mainly, again, about security and support for Ukraine. So he's on his tour of the world. David?
I'll just point out it's Hiroshima in Japan.
That's right.
Just saying.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. This is a good point. Yeah, okay. In the meantime, of course, we have NATO, the latest NATO exercises going on, and
well, that's not very good for global warming, is it?
Well, this particular
outrageous.
Shocking.
That should be an electric tank.
Well, it should be an electric tank.
Yeah.
This is exercise Spring Storm. So 1,500 troops going over to on top of what's already in the Enhanced Forward Presence battle group in Estonia. So personnel from all three services of the armed forces being deployed in Estonia to carry out exercises and operations. I'm not sure, can you explain what's the difference between an exercise and an operation? An operation, I would have thought, was something which is happening.
Well, the operation should be reality.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's exercises and operations, then what are they actually doing in Ukraine, in Estonia? So 14,000 personnel from 11 NATO countries are going to demonstrate their interoperability in multi-domain training exercises as part of this. So let's see, what we got. The RAF are going to carry out training exercises in reconnaissance and air-land integration. And my question is it just going to be exercises I don't know, but anyway, this is what Ben Wallace had to say. While the Russian army continues their illegal invasion of Ukraine, threatening stability in Europe, the UK and our allies will continue to support Ukraine and defend our shared values and freedom. So that's the comment that he made with respect to this exercise. So people can make up their own minds as to whether this is just about a training program or whether there's something going on under the cover of a training program.
That's shared values and freedom under the rules-based international order, of course.
Yes.
Well, a very, very quick summary of what's happening on the battlefront. And the key bit is Ukraine has started an offensive. I'm using clips from a variety of people. I'm giving recognition to the people who are spending the time to analyse what's happening, because, of course, we can't trust mainstream media or the BBC. So this one is showing the Donbass area around Bakhmut, and the yellow arrows are showing the general direction of Ukrainian attacks. Don't be fooled by the size of the arrows, because the size of ground that the Ukrainians have taken is generally very small, a kilometre, a mile into Russian territory. Losses on both sides have been exceptionally heavy, but over the last couple of days in particular, things have stabilised and do not appear to have moved forward on the Ukrainian side. But recognition to the bravery of the Ukrainian troops, because they are out there doing the bidding of the West and attacking the Russians so Zelensky can get more weapons. So if we bring in the next one, this is from Weeb Union, so a different source, but we're seeing the same thing, attacks around the flanks of Bakhmut. And if I just bring in another one here, you can see a little bit more detail of one of the areas. The depth of the salient, which is just to the northwest of Bakhmut, is about 2 kilometers or a little bit under. So the Ukrainians moved forward over the frontline trenches of the Russians, but then were stopped by the rear troops, and that is the pattern now across the battlefield. So attacks have taken place in other sectors up to the north. This area, possibly about 50,000 Ukrainian troops spread between a northern attack and a southern attack, but it's very difficult to pin down the actual numbers of troops. 2 Russian aircraft were shot down, an Su-25 and an Su-24, and also an Mi-8 helicopter. And this is the result of the Ukrainians bringing their air defences forward in the battlefield, but this is not a major offensive, it would appear at the moment, by the Ukrainians, and many of the commentators doubt whether they can do it. If we have a look at Bakhmut, this is the so-called citadel area of the Ukrainians. So this is an area of high-rise buildings which were all heavily fortified, and the Wagner forces are now in through the perimeter, and they maintain that they have 20 key buildings to take, but sometimes it's taking a day or 2 days to take each building. But perhaps most importantly, the Russians have unleashed a ferocious missile attack on staging areas and ammunition dumps, not only close to the front itself, but deep into Ukraine. Let's have a look at footage of this massive explosion.
Ебать осколки нахуй. Охуеть нахуй. Ебать, десь тут осколок впав нахуй.
So a massive explosion. Nobody quite knows how many tons, hundreds of tons of munitions were taken out in that Russian attack, but clearly a massive amount of ammunition. And if you listen carefully, you could hear that there were continuous explosions going on as munitions exploded after the main strike. If we look at this embedded clip here, we'll just play this on screen for you, if you pop it on. And this one should come up. And the significance of this is you can see the scale of these explosions in relations to the buildings that you can see in the foreground. So is this UK taxpayers' money going up in smoke? Is this depleted uranium? Nobody knows, but we know that the Russians now are playing a really hard game, and they're going for all of the munitions and the reinforcements from NATO. There's the sheer scale of that, and we have to say what is in that smoke and what is actually now being dumped over the poor Ukrainian population. If we carry on through, there's quite a lot of talk over social media, which we're challenging at the moment, but people are saying that is it possible that there was depleted uranium shells in that dump? We're going to ask the question, what does happen when UK's depleted uranium shells are destroyed? Does that result in an increase in radiation in the area? So this is circulating. We are at the moment not convinced by what's circulating on social media, but the fear factor is one thing, the truth is another. We're going to thank Alex O from Berkham Hampstead, who was kind enough to say he's recording radiation levels in UK on his own home Geiger counter, and he's going to be keeping us informed about what picture he sees. So we'll hopefully have more from Alex. But you've got some comments on this as well.
Well,
Mike.
just because that those graphs were circulating around the place, so I wanted to see the source, and the source is the Joint Research Centre Radioactive Environmental Monitoring website of the European Commission. And if we have a look at that particular measurement, we can see 157, a daily average for gamma radiation, 157 nanosieverts per hour. And we look at that's the graph that's been circulating on social media. And, the implication on social media is that where you see that massive rise to the right-hand side, from about 95 nanosieverts to what's that, about 150 or so, that seemed to coincide with the
Date of the explosion.
the explosion, the day of the explosion. But actually, if you zoom in on that, it's not. The rise happened 2 days before the explosion. So there must be some other explanation for this, and I'd like to know what that explanation is. So that's why we're still skeptical about exactly what the cause of that rise is.
Right, but we prolong the war. These type of attacks are going to increase. And David, just before you move on, this must be taking us ever closer to World War III.
Well, this is the question, how the more effective the Ukrainians are, and this is, you covered the small-scale counter attacks that are going on just now. That's one thing. The more effective the Ukrainian counterattacks are, the more likely it is that the Russians will look to take out some of the supply lines that are helping the Ukrainians. And that, of course, would bring them more directly into conflict with NATO. So this is vastly dangerous. And nobody, it would appear, in Western governments seems to care.
I would even go further. It's not that they don't care. They absolutely care. They're absolutely enthusiastic that we maintain those supplies running, and they, in some cases, are openly calling for direct confrontation. I'm talking about Tobias Ellwood there as an example.